All right, welcome everyone. My name is Roni Ben David. I'm the Director of Social Justice and Inclusion at JCHS, and I love that I already get to see people who are coming next year. I have to tell you all that at 2 p.m. today, I co-led the Senior Buddy Training. And here, we'll stop sharing for a moment so we can see each other. The Senior Buddy Training basically is the first meeting of the rising seniors who are psyched to be your senior buddies to incoming ninth graders. We have 35 senior buddies, so pretty much the entire rising senior class wants to be buddies. And I think what I love about that is when I was in high school, I had this feeling that like the seniors were out to get the freshmen. You know, like there's movies about hazing and like get out of my way, seniors. But actually at JCHS, the seniors are so excited to welcome you and make you feel comfortable. And we started the senior buddy meeting by remembering when we were incoming ninth graders, what were we most nervous about? And so these 11th graders talked about, I worried I wouldn't meet people who and think the way that I think, or are interested in the same things as me, or I am afraid I'm not going to be Jewish enough for JCHS, or I'm going to be too Jewish, or I won't find friends that are different and interesting. And so we talked about that, and then we also reflected on how far we've come and how much we feel a sense of belonging at JCHS. And that was what got us into thinking about what it means to create an inclusive environment for incoming ninth graders. So I'm fresh, I'm like high from that meeting today, and now coming full circle because I get to see you all here. Thank you so much for coming to this program. I am also joined by, there's a few folks from the admissions team, and then there's Sophie, you wanna wave? Sophie Fudum, who's a current 12th grader. She's got like a few weeks left of being in high school. And then Nathan Hasagawa, Nathan, you can raise your hand, who is a rising senior. He's a current junior. And they're gonna help me talk about what social justice and inclusion are at JCHS based on their experiences as students. So I'll go back to sharing my screen. And just so you know, if you have any questions as I'm going through the slideshow, you can type them into the chat box. This isn't gonna be, I think I even have a slide that tells you that. This isn't gonna be a lot of frontal. Oh, no, I don't have a slide for that. I'm gonna talk a little bit about what it looks like here, but I really wanted this to be guided by what you're interested in. And to open us up, I'm gonna show a video. And then I'm gonna ask a few of you to share based on the video. So this is, if you've ever heard of Storycorps, wave if you've ever heard of Storycorps. Maybe some of you who've heard it on the radio. Basically, it's a national program where people interview other people in their lives, and then it gets recorded and stored somewhere really fancy. And sometimes Storycorps takes little snippets of the interviews and animates them. And so this is a real interview with somebody named Facundo, and he's talking about his experience growing up in elementary school. And it has to do with identity, and that's why I wanted to start with this. So, and then I'm gonna do that. Hang on, I think it makes me. There we go.
My name, when I started kindergarten, was Ramon. And by the time I was in the second grade, everybody was calling me Raymond. You know, out in the playground, in the classroom, Raymond, hey, Raymond, hey, Raymond. And trying to adjust to this, you know what I mean? And if there was a girl named Maria, her name became Mary. And Juanita became Jane. So one day, we got a new student by the name of Facundo Gonzalez. Facundo Gonzalez, man. When he came into school, we noticed they called it an emergency administrative meeting. You could kind of hear him talking through the door. You know, what are we going to do with this guy, man? You know what I mean? How are we going to change his name, you know? And one teacher goes, well, you know what? Why don't we try to shorten the name a little bit? And they go, yeah, well, but how do you spell it? Facundo. I go, well, why don't we just spell it Fac? And one of the teachers, well, that would mean his name would be Fock. And the other teachers looked at it, no, that sounds too much like a dirty word. You can't be saying Fock. Where's your homework? Where's Fock at? You know what I mean? So that was a trip we always remembered going to elementary school, because Facundo was the only guy who never got his name changed.
Okay. So if I could, I'd love to sit and talk to you guys about a little bit more about the story, but really I want this to also be a way for us to see one another, because clearly this video is about identity and the significance of names. Names so often tell the story about who we are and what matters to us and what's important about us. And so I'm wondering if a few of you, let's say 2 or 3, would be willing to share the story of your name. It could be about your first name, your middle name, your last name, maybe the name that you've chosen to go by, a nickname. So I'm just gonna look through. I know it's sort of putting you on the spot, but we're a small group here this evening. So raise your hand if you'd be willing to just say a few things about tell a little bit of a story about your name. Otherwise, Sarah, go for it. You can unmute yourself.
Okay. Well, I don't have a extremely interesting name. It's Sarah, but my last name is like pretty long. It's confusing. It's title bomb. But when I was younger, everyone would call me title bomb, because I don't know. I think they just pronounced it that way.
Mm.
And I don't know. I kind of found it funny. I wasn't offended by it actually at all.
Yeah. Would you correct them, or you just let it go?
Nope.
Mm-hmm. 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 Thank you for stepping up to share a little bit about your name. Does anyone else want to share? Sometimes our names say something about our family. We're given a name that represents somebody who was important in our lineage or in the lives of our family, and that can be really significant too. And whenever Jason, you want to share? Okay, go for it.
My name's actually Van. That's just my dad's name he put on it.
There you go. I said the wrong name. Thank you, Van.
My name is actually a really family personal part of it. On, wasn't it mom's side?
Yes. Her father,
my great-grandfather.
maiden name is Van Gelder, and everyone called him Mr. Van. And so he got that from his last name. So Van is actually a part of his mother's side's family history.
Wow.
And I've only met one other person throughout my entire life with the name Van, and it was V-A-N-N. Mine is just V-A-N.
Van, thank you for sharing that. That's actually a really beautiful story. This sort of accidental way that somebody on your mother's side got this name, and now it became sort of his identity, and you get to carry that on. It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So I think part of what's so beautiful about your stories and about the Storycorps story is what it means to be seen and valued for who you are. And that's really important. And when we're talking about social justice and inclusion at JCHS, social justice is about deepening our awareness of our own different parts of our own identities and how that shapes the way we see the world and how others see and experience the world. And also having an understanding of big picture of systems of inequality, of who has power and who doesn't have power, and how that contributes to the picture of injustice that we see today, how we can make sense of it. Whereas, and in that way, when we're seeing someone facing homelessness, when we're hearing about some groups disproportionately being impacted by COVID-19, we have an entry point to understand it more deeply and to have authentic conversations about it. A lot of times students are like, how do I have these hard conversations? So that's something else we work on. How do you have conversations where there might be disagreement or conflict? And a lot of times that's social justice, and then we think of inclusion as something different. But the way I see it is social justice starts here in our own backyards, in our own homes, in our own schools. And so inclusion at JCHS is really social justice in our own community. And we do that by working really hard to create an environment where everyone feels valued, respected, and like empowered to contribute and lead. So I'm going to kind of describe little areas where it shows up, and then and I'll ask students to talk about their personal experiences, and then I'll send it back to you to talk more or to get at your questions. So it really starts before you even begin classes. Typically we have a 9th grade welcome retreat, which is outdoors, and we'll see what it looks like this fall, but no matter what, you're going to have a 9th grade welcome retreat, which is led by these enthusiastic senior buddies who are thinking about how we can embrace differences and really conveying that to new 9th graders. So we're already creating this culture of valuing one another and appreciating one another's differences. And also they facilitate conversations. So as 9th graders, you're going to be having these conversations with seniors where you look at particular scenarios and figure out, like, scenarios of exclusion. What would I do in this situation? That way you're sort of getting practice before it ever happens, if any of these things happen, and also getting a sense of, like, this is how we do it at JCHS. We don't let you, we don't, we strive to not let anyone feel like they're not have a real sense, they don't have a real sense of belonging. And that really continues. I lead part of your freshman seminar. It's called Identity Matters. And that's where we have conversations about our identities and how does that help us read the world? How do we approach situations based on the skin we're in? And we do role playing, we play games, and we get a lot closer as a grade, as a 9th grade, and also better at building that sort of empathy and understanding for others. So that's a big culture builder in the 9th grade. Another thing that's really important is to hear different perspectives. And I want you right now to think to yourself about a time that you heard a story, someone's story, that really changed the way that you think or act. Maybe it was hearing a speaker, maybe it was watching a video or like a documentary or a movie or reading a book. I think we've all had that experience. And at JCHS, about every week, we have community block, which is an all-school assembly where we bring in guests from the outside. And usually it's voices we don't get to hear. Typically, we don't get to hear. And it's exploring social issues. And it's through storytelling. So we have here on the top, there's a young man who's been a real leader in the youth-led climate activism, climate change movement, climate activism. He talked about his experiences. He did some spoken word, hip hop. We have them every week. And what's been interesting is even now that we're at home, we're still doing these all-school assemblies from our computers on Zoom. Just last week, we had one of the founders of Boba Guys talk about, which is like a really popular spot that JCHS students go because it's 2 blocks away. But he's a socially responsible entrepreneur. So he talked about why they got rid of straws at Boba Guys in order to create a more sustainable business. But we've had lots of different voices in these community blocks. Again, exposing ourselves to different perspectives, you can see there. And then, if you want to go deeper into what it means to enact social justice, to have a framework of understanding, and then figure out strategies for social change, to be agents of social change, you could do it in the classroom. So I teach a Jewish social justice course, and there's also going to be a Jewish ethics course next year. And then it's really woven into any of your Jewish studies classes, any of your humanities classes. And I wonder if, actually both Sophie and, let me pause and just say, can you guys hear me okay, or am I glitchy? Leslie, do you want to tell me? I know sometimes the internet. Am I okay? I might have to move. Well, I'll turn the floor over to one of the students who's been in my social justice class. I wonder, actually, we'll start, Nathan, you were in that class last year. Do you want to say a little bit about what made that class different in terms of exploring social justice, or what you got from the class? And Nathan, we'll just need your video on.
Do you want me to talk?
Yeah, go for it, Sophie. don't see your video.
Okay. Okay. Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. I'm gonna go to a different space, y'all, that might have better internet.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I see in the chat that other people's connections are dropping. Mine too. Miss Ben David, can you repeat your question?
Yes, my question as I move is, what was your experience? What do you feel like are one or two things you got from being in a class where we are exploring social justice?
Thank you. Okay. So I took it last year, my junior year, and I think it was my absolute favorite. It was my absolute favorite Jewish Studies elective. I really enjoyed how open and how the students led the class. Bad phrasing, but we as a class got to decide when we were ready to move on to the next topic. We learned about so many different things. I think it really opened up my eyes on like the neighborhood that our school is in is also the same neighborhood that I live in. And it really made me stop and appreciate everything that I have, the people I'm surrounded by, and just, I don't know, it lets you take that time to look inward and to really like look at yourself, to look at other people, and like kind of decide who you want to be and how you want to make change. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you, Sophie. There's a lot of in class. It tends to be a class where we get really close because we talk a lot about our personal experiences. And another area, so outside of the classroom, in addition to doing community service, we have our Journey program, Experiential Education. You've probably heard about this at open houses and such, but I think that when I am in this moment in time, I think that the questions that we're asking when we go on the 12th grade journey are incredibly relevant, which is how do disasters amplify inequality? And can you guys hear the chickens next to me? Okay, as long as you can hear me. I moved outside and so the chickens surround me, they're like dogs. It's really interesting. How do disasters amplify inequality and what influences my moral intuition? What I mean by that is like, what makes me feel like I want to take action when I see injustice versus feel overwhelmed or like somebody else is doing it, the psychology behind that. We explore that on the 12th grade journey. And then the last thing I really want to talk about is a question that many of you put in your RSVP. What can I do? How can I get involved? So there are lots of ways that you can get involved, and this is another thing students on this call can talk about, but in addition to the community outreach program where you're volunteering together in 9th grade and then you're choosing your own path in 10th and 11th grade, there's the Student Advisory Board. It's a student club, leadership club, that is dedicated to inclusion within the school and fighting bias. And they do lots of things from creating a rally against gun violence and an all-school event, a walkout actually, going to Sacramento to lobby. A group of students decided they wanted to petition, not even really petition, but they wanted to examine our dress code. They created a listening session of students and came to the administration, and the administration heard their concerns and we made changes. And then in this year, there was a lot of talk about how student voice can, there can be more student voice in how the school approaches grading. So typically it's about student voice and empowerment and inclusion in the school. There's also a club called Students for Progressive Reform. They watch videos. They did a voter registration drive at JCHS. They do poster campaigns. There's ally trainings that you can get involved in. There's really fun all-school events like Pride Week, Day of Silence, which is around people who are forced into silence based on their gender identity or sexuality. There's Mizrahi Heritage Month. There's lots of ways that we celebrate as a school our identities and our differences as strengths. And then there are affinity spaces. If your middle school has anything like that, it's spaces based on a part of your identity where you can seek, where you get support and share experiences. And we had a Bay Area event for Jewish teens of color that was open to students outside of JCHS. There's also a conference that we send students to every fall called Student Diversity Leadership Conference. Sophie and Nathan went to that. Nathan, do you want to say anything about, I think your connection works now. Do you want to say anything about Sdlc, Student Diversity Leadership Conference?
Yeah, so essentially this was a really, really interesting and, useful moment for me that I will probably never forget. I flew up to, it was in December, I flew up to Seattle, and essentially it was 2 days of basically there were a bunch of things that happened. So, the keynote speaker, this is the conference, the keynote speaker was, Skylar Baylor, this guy who was the first ever, and thus far the only transgender male to participate in a sport at the NCAA level, and it was really interesting. And we also spent a lot of time just talking about, ourselves, the problems in our communities, and then essentially they're trying to equip us with the tools that we can use to go back to, our own communities and fix them and make them better and move them toward this more perfect world that we don't live in yet.
Thanks, Nathan. And typically students will come back from Student Diversity Leadership Conference, share out to other students, and also the faculty. It's really important that our faculty hear from them too about what their concerns are and their hopes are. So with that, I wanted to open it up to you all. I'm going to stop the screen share so we can just see one another. And again, if you have any questions about what is inclusion, how do we create an inclusive environment at JCHS? How can you get involved? What does it mean to study social justice? How do we respond today to the injustices we see today? Just let us know. And you can also, we're such a small group, you can put in the chat box or you can just raise your hand and let me know. I'm looking around. Maybe that means your questions were answered. It's also great to see just who decided they want to be here tonight. I'll find you guys when you're at JCHS and give you extra special attention. Sophie, is there anything else you want to add? Given that you have been at JCHS for 4 years, through high school, always
mute myself.
Yeah.
Yes. I really love JCHS now. As a senior, as someone who's leaving, but in the beginning, it was a really hard change going from the school I went to before for 9 years to a place with everyone new and exciting, and I didn't really explore my religion. I felt like I was going to be kind of like an outsider, and that really changed, I think, my sophomore year of high school, when I started partaking in clubs and joining things rather than kind of sitting there, because that was definitely the kind of person I was as a freshman. I was someone who wanted to watch everything happen and kind of take my cues. But as I got more comfortable in myself, in my body, with my ideas, with my religion, with, everything, and that's a lot to do with Miss Van David, just because she's such a sweet human being, as hopefully you will get to know. I think it's gonna help you come out of your shell. It's gonna help you, I don't know, JCHS is so encouraging, and everything that they do, as wacky or as awkward as it may seem in the beginning, if you put yourself into it and get into it, then you enjoy yourself, you find yourself growing, and you start talking to people of other grades. You start talking to teachers as if they're like people and not teachers, which is a strange thing to do, but ultimately really wonderful. I think that there is definitely something to be said about like the JCHS community being so inclusive. You're definitely going to find your group, a group, multiple groups, the whole school could be your group, where you can, you know, grow and thrive.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you. Thanks for sharing your own journey from being more timid in terms of getting involved to getting involved and feeling like your whole self can show up here.
Can I say something on this, please?
Did I hear a voice? Nathan, did you want to, is that you?
Yeah. Because I just want to say something to you all. Like, as someone who's been here for a few years now, we've really made a lot of progress in this regard since I was a freshman. A lot of the conversations that you're going to be having next year about, you know, identity and, you know, who you are, I think that I never got when I was a freshman, right? We basically, you know, we've come a long way on this in the last few years. I really, truly feel that JCHS is a more inclusive place than it was 3 years ago, and that we've done a lot of work to, you know, address some of the bias issues within our community, to address some of the interpersonal issues within our community. And I really, truly believe that, you know, we're making progress. Every year we make a bit more progress on this. Every year, you know, we get a bit better at handling issues like these that I'm sure you all are wondering about. And so I just want to say that, like, I really think that we've come really far, and I'm looking forward to you guys helping us out to push ourselves even further into what we are capable of as a community.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan. And you can get involved in a really active way, even in 9th grade, joining one of these clubs, but also just, you're going to be doing a lot of building social justice within your grade. I know that there was a question about GSA. Some schools call it Gay Straight Alliance. We call it the Gender and Sexuality Alliance. Sophie's had a lot of leadership in it. And it's a club that
Great club.
We meet regularly for just like community building, but we also plan all school programs like the Day of Silence, where people take a vow. Can you hear the chicken? I wish she would take a vow of silence. Where people take a vow of silence to raise awareness about those who are forced into silence around their identity. And we also have a really joyful Pride Week that everyone's part of, whether it's cookies and Harvey Milk Day, where we watch the Harvey Milk documentary and have cookies, trivia around LGBTQ history, educational pieces, advocacy opportunities. So that's the GSA. Another person asked about how we address inherent racism and biases. And that's something that we do in 9th grade in the Identity Matters course. We talk about what is implicit bias. What are the ways that we didn't stand a chance, you know, because we're all sort of breathing the same smog, so to speak, around biases. And how can we be empowered to notice them so that they don't impact our actions, and we can respect one another, treat one another with dignity. And everything is rooted, because it's JCHS, in some of the ideas around the protection of dignity that are part of our tradition. So that's a little about, I think, addressing some of those questions that you had. And let's see if there's any more in the chat box. What specific classes about this does JCHS offer, and are they worth college credit? Yes, they're UC approved. Jewish social justice, and then we have a new Jewish ethics course that's different. And there's in humanities, there's been a race, class, and gender course. And then, you know, Sophie probably has more experience about how that comes into play with in other courses.
Yeah. So I'm completely done with the college process, which is another thing that JCHS does a great work with. They get you started when you're ready. They don't put too much pressure on you and everything. But in terms of the classes and how they count for college credit is this past year, they're getting all of the most or all of the Jewish electives they can approved, I guess is their word, or like approved as like a humanities course for UCs and CSUs, which is a pretty big deal because a lot of JCHS kids go to those colleges. I know for me, I got a lot of my classes as like electives, and a lot of colleges just really want to hear that you have some sort of passion, some sort of interest. They don't really care what it is. They just want to know that you have that drive in something in particular. And I think if you're worried about college now, don't be. JCHS prepares you more than I think any other school would. Just, I don't know. I feel very prepared to go into the next 4 years with my JCHS, not just education, but like my social skills, the things that I've learned in Miss Ben David's class and like my other classes, the practical life skills on how to take good notes and things like that. So they really are very efficient at making like a whole student, not just like a good test taker, but like a well-rounded human being.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And you know, I think when it comes to social justice in particular, we want to be prepared to be part of a diverse world, diverse in terms of identities, but also experiences, and just bring that sort of cultural competency. Some people say it's been interesting for me to see that now on college essays, they all ask about that. Job interviews, it's certainly something that we ask when we're interviewing prospective members of the professional community. We want to make sure that they have that kind of awareness as well and skills in terms of teaching that kind of material, and be able to teach different kinds of learners, different kinds of students. Again, social justice has to start in the classroom and we move out from there. So it's a value that sort of pervades all of our work. And I'll say on the faculty level, we have an anti-racist educators group that meets every other week, and we have a book club reading books around race and racism, and we have these conversations all the time. We also have affinity spaces based on gender, sexual orientation, various parts of our identity. So we're also doing the work on ourselves, which is really important to show up for students in that way. Well, thank you all for being here, for coming here. If you have any other questions, maybe that come to you later, or you didn't know if you wanted to ask in this space, please email me. I would love to be in touch with you leading up to when we meet in the fall. And thank you again for making the time to be here. And thank you to the current JCHS students and the incoming JCHS students and families. I'm really excited to spend this time with you. And the chickens are too.